Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster number 4. Now things are starting to get serious. The fourth game in the series, originally titled FF2 in the US, was first released in 1991 and since then has received loads of different versions and even a complete remake for the DS in 2007. At the time of its release, FF4 was met with critical acclaim, with its revolutionary active time battle mechanics and storytelling being the standout features. It was also the RPG to introduce spoony bards, which is quite possibly the best known quote in the entire series, except for maybe this. Now, I've played this game multiple times over the years, and to be honest, I don't hold it quite as high as some other people. Now, it was absolutely a revolutionary RPG for 1991, but since then, I feel that most of the FFs that followed it were better games. So, when people say that FF4 is the best in the series, I beg to differ. With that said, I do highly recommend playing FF4 if you want to go back and get a taste of Final Fantasy history, and this Pixel Remaster is a great way to do so. Before we get into this review, I need some help to defeat the final boss of YouTube, the evil algorithm, so hit that like button and level up this video. I've also been reviewing all of the Pixel Remasters, so feel free to sub if you want more. Alright, let's get into it. The major difference between Final Fantasy IV and its predecessors is its focus on story. Previously, we had some pretty basic narratives and the characters that filled the world had very little depth. This all changed with Final Fantasy IV, and many longtime fans even consider it as their favourite in the series, largely because of its story and cast of characters. You play the role of the Dark Knight Cecil, captain of the Barren Kingdom's Red Wings. After the king orders him to travel to a town and steal the water crystal at the cost of innocent lives, Cecil begins to question the king's morality, and this is where the journey begins. Final Fantasy IV is not a happy game. There is a lot of death and many emotional moments. Cecil has to deal with it a lot, so much more than Fighter did back in FF1. There are some great moments here too, and these are supported by an outstanding soundtrack, one that sounds even better re-recorded for this Pixel Remaster, such as when you witness a village burn to the ground, or during some of Rosa and Cecil's emotional conversations with each other. This story was groundbreaking for a game released in 1991, and it's easy to see why it's loved so much. I love it too, I really do, but I will point out for those who haven't played the game that the storytelling is not the same standard as some later Super Nintendo RPGs. Now, there are a few reasons for this. For starters, the dialogue and lack of animations don't really allow the story to be driven home like it would have had it been released a few years later. The pacing of this narrative is also incredibly fast. Final Fantasy IV does not waste your time. In fact, I finished the game in about 12 hours and a lot happens during this time. While this pacing certainly keeps things interesting at all times, I felt that sometimes it doesn't really allow these awesome moments to be as impactful as they could be. I know that most of you will probably disagree with me with a handgun pointed at my head, but I couldn't help but feel that some slower, more deliberate pacing could have done wonders here. What I'm trying to say is that for a 1991 RPG, this storytelling is sensational. I enjoy it every time I play it, but keep your expectations in check as I found its dialogue and delivery not up to the standard as some later RPGs on the system. I just keep imagining how amazing a current generation console remake could be with a more elaborate retelling of this story. Most of my 12-hour journey was spent on dungeon crawling and traversing the 3 world maps, which I always thought was pretty cool. This short game length can be largely attributed to the lack of grinding requirement. Your characters will need only half of the EXP to level up, which ensures that you are always at a good level to take on bosses. I said in my FF3 Pixel Remaster review that I felt that they got the random encounter rate perfect with that one. Unfortunately, random battles are much more frequent this time around, but it was never too much of an issue since most of the dungeons aren't really that long. The major upgrade to Final Fantasy IV's combat is the introduction of the active time battle, which became a staple of the series and is used in many future entries. Characters will now have to wait for their turn to come around, which can be seen on a gauge next to the character's name. Different actions also have different wait times. For example, physically attacking is instant, while casting a powerful spell may take several seconds. This sense of urgency also adds a whole new dynamic to battle and forces you to think ahead while your character is waiting for the next turn. The ATB system also has 2 modes that can be changed in the settings, and this is the closest thing you'll find to difficulty settings. Wait mode means that the gauge stops when in the magic or item menus, giving you more time to plan your attacks. Active mode on the other hand means that the gauge is always moving, putting a lot more pressure on you to act as fast as possible. I'm a really big fan of these ATB systems in classic FF games and generally had a lot of fun with FF4's combat. Hell, they even named a move after me. I've made it to the big time, guys. The formation system is also worth mentioning. It's quite strange. For the first and last time in an FF game, there are only 2 formations, 2 in the front and 3 in the back, or 3 in the front and 2 in the back. Position 1, 3 and 5 will always be in the same row, with position 2 and 4 being in the other row. This never really impacted the game, as most of the time there is a logical setup for the members that you're given at the time, but still, I felt that this was quite odd. Now, there were a couple of things that I had an issue with when it came to the combat and character abilities. Each character comes with 1 or 2 unique abilities to use in battle, but it would have been very useful to know what these abilities actually do. Some of these were fairly obvious, like Twin Cast where Param and Palom cast a spell together, but others left me clueless, like with the Cry or Bluff abilities. I also had no idea that Edward's heal ability actually uses potions in the inventory until I was in the middle of a boss battle and ran out of potions. Another area where this game falls short is in its character customization. Aside from equipping weapons and armor, there is nothing. This was particularly disappointing after playing FF3, which provides loads of party customization options through the job system. I mean, even FF1 provided the ability to choose which magic spells to learn. In FF4's defense, there is at least a large number of characters who will come and go from your party, each having their own unique abilities, but I still felt that the game could have done a lot better in this regard. The Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster features the same enhancements as the previous Pixel Remasters. The refined pixel art style and fully reorchestrated soundtrack made the game look and sound better, and the many quality of life enhancements such as mini-maps, auto battle and quick saves make the overall gaming experience much more enjoyable. I tell ya, this soundtrack is really awesome and it was great to hear it all over again. Now, this is all great, but there is still a couple of reasons why this Pixel Remaster may not be the best way to play the 2D version of the game. Let's start with the cut content. The Cave of Trials and the Lunar Runes were 2 dungeons available in the Game Boy Advance and PSP versions of the game, and unfortunately both have been cut this time around. The Secret Developers Office, which allowed you to talk to the game's developers, was also taken out completely. I know that these Pixel Remasters are all based on the original NES and SNES releases, but I still can't help but feel disappointed that these areas were cut. And as mentioned before, the game is a lot easier too, with only half of the amount of EXP required to level up. Arrows are also infinite and there are no longer any inventory limits, so that fat chocobo that used to gobble up all of our items is no longer necessary. I'm sure that this cut content and reduced challenge will annoy some of you, but if you're not worried about this, it would be hard to argue against this being the best way to play 2D Final Fantasy IV. 4 Pixel Remasters down, 2 to go. Despite its acclaim, if you ask me, FF4 is far from the best Final Fantasy of all time, but it was the best in the series up to that point, quite easily. It was all about the story for me, and to experience this tale in 1991 when most other RPGs hadn't yet taken this step would have been mind-blowing. Some of the characters, arcs, and relationships have always been among my favourite in the FF series. The other major leap forward was with the ATB combat system. The sense of urgency that this creates presents some pretty intense moments in battle. However, the one feature that I felt was a step backwards was a lack of character customization options, with the only option being the character's equipment. Then, of course, we have all of these Pixel Remaster editions, which enhances the visuals, the outstanding soundtrack, and provides loads of quality of life features. But this Pixel Remaster also comes at a cost, and that is the content that has been cut from previous versions and the overall much easier experience, which may put some of you off. The Final Fantasy series is well known for its storytelling, and Final Fantasy IV is the first time we get to see a quality narrative, and for this reason alone, FF4 is worth checking out. What did you think of this game? Let me know in the comments below. Did you know that Final Fantasy IV used an ostrich in one of its Japanese commercials? This ad is hilarious, and if you want to learn more FF4 facts and Easter eggs, check out my Know the Facts video linked here. Also, if you liked this video, hit like and sub for more RPG content. See you next time.